Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
I stared at the slip of paper for a long time. 7 days. That's what it said in big bold letters. 7 days until the sheriff showed up and tossed our crap out onto the curb. 7 days until I had to tell my daughter we had nowhere to go. My name's Darren. I'm 39. I live in Keyport, New Jersey, or more specifically, I survive in a 2-bedroom dump above a liquor store on Broad Street. The kind of place where you keep the blinds shut so you don't see what's happening out on the sidewalk. The rent was $950. Sounded cheap until you realized it came with brown water from the ceiling, a bathroom that smelled like sewage every time it rained, and neighbors upstairs who made it their life mission to scream louder than the sirens outside. I once counted 3 police cars and 2 ambulances in one night. Lacey, my daughter, 7 years old and way too observant, asked me if someone had died. I told her no, but honestly, who knows? That morning I had $38 in my wallet, 1 can of soup in the cabinet, and a kid who hadn't had a proper dinner in 2 days. I tried to hide it, made it into a game. Let's pretend we're camping. But she wasn't dumb. She just went along with it to make me feel better. Quick note, before we start, share in the comments how's your day going and where are you joining from. And let's continue. She'd stopped using the laundry room a few months back, after the kids upstairs tore up her drawings in the hallway. She'd spent hours on those. I still remember how she stood there holding the ripped-up pages like someone had punched her in the stomach. Didn't cry. Just said, "I guess they didn't like them," and walked back inside. That was the moment I knew we couldn't stay here. The ceiling leaked every time it rained. Not just a drip, full-on brown water pouring through a crack above the kitchen sink. I'd put a plastic tub there to catch it, but half the time it overflowed. The walls were sticky. The place reeked of mildew, like a wet basement no matter how much I cleaned. Once I found mushrooms, real mushrooms, growing behind the couch. That's when I stopped inviting anybody over, not that I had friends left to invite. The mom upstairs called Lacey a rat once, right to her face. Lacey had just been walking to the stairwell. I stepped in before it got worse, but the look on my daughter's face told me it already had. We didn't report it. You don't report anything around here. You just keep your head down and hope nothing worse happens. The job I had, dock hand work down at the marina, barely covered rent, let alone groceries. Hours were getting cut, and the owner had started making noises about going seasonal. I was maybe 2 weeks from losing that too. I picked up the 7-day notice again, held it up to the window. The light came through the paper like it was made of fog. I didn't have a backup plan, no savings, no family left. Just me and Lacey, and $38 between us. She came out of the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. Her pajamas were 2 sizes too small. "Dad, can I take Toast to school?" she asked. I smiled like it was a real option. "Of course, sweetheart," except we were out of bread. I opened the cabinet and stared at that 1 dented can of soup. Cream of chicken, store brand. No label anymore, just a silver can with rust on the bottom. I'd eaten worse, but I wasn't about to let her know that. We were stuck. I didn't see a way out. Not one that didn't involve a shelter or sleeping in the car. I'd failed. That's what it felt like. I'd let her down. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Ray, a guy I used to unload skiffs with down at the docks, said there was a county auction happening the next day. Boats, equipment, repos. Might be something cheap, he wrote. Worth a look. I almost deleted the message. What the hell was I going to do with a busted boat? But I stared at it for a long time, because anything was better than this. She didn't say anything at first, just stared out the passenger window while I pulled out of the school lot. Her little legs were swinging under the seat, and her backpack was zipped all the way to the top, tight, like she didn't want anything spilling out. After a few blocks, she looked over and asked, "Where are we going?" I tapped the rusted key on the steering wheel. "To see our new home." She blinked. "Like a house?" I smiled. "Not exactly. You'll see." We pulled into the marina a little after 4. Most of the lot was empty. I parked near the far dock and helped her out of the car. She kept squinting into the sun, her hand over her forehead like a little soldier. There was a breeze off the water, thick with salt and diesel. You never forget that smell if you've worked a dock. Slip 71 was at the far end, tied off crooked, bumping gently against the rubber fenders. The Callista, 32 feet of faded white fiberglass, red trim mostly peeled off, and a name half scraped off the stern like someone gave up midway through erasing a memory. She took one look and said, "This is a boat." "Yep," I said. "It's ours." Lacey tilted her head. "Can it go anywhere?" "Not yet," I said. "But it's going to stay still, and it's quiet. No walls to share." She walked to the edge of the dock and looked down into the cabin through the cracked glass. "Is it safe?" I held up the key. "Let's find out." The inside smelled like a locker room that had been sealed shut since the 80s. Hot plastic, mildew, salt, and something sharp underneath. Maybe fish, maybe old grease. I opened the hatch and let her climb down first. Her sneakers landed with a thud on the soft vinyl floor. Then she covered her nose with her sleeve. "It stinks," she said. "Give it time," I told her. "We'll clean it, get the air moving, might even find some cool stuff." The lights didn't work, but sunlight was still coming through the cabin windows. It was a mess. Rotted wood panels, mold on the ceiling corners, busted cabinet doors hanging off hinges. But no rats, no holes in the floor, and more importantly, no screaming neighbors on the other side of a paper-thin wall. "This is really ours?" she asked again. "As long as we want it to be." That night, after I tucked her in on a camping mat next to the aft bench, I stepped back out onto the dock and lit a cigarette. I hadn't smoked in 6 months, but I'd kept one in my wallet for nights like this. Nights where everything teetered between collapse and hope. I thought about the guy I'd outbid. He'd looked like one of those part-time salvage creeps. Cargo pants, 2 phones, probably wanted the Callista for parts. If I hadn't offered to pay cash on the spot, I wouldn't be standing here right now. Earlier that morning, I'd gone into Hartman's pawn and laid Melanie's wedding ring on the counter. Small diamond, simple gold band. She picked it out herself when we were too broke for anything fancier. The guy behind the glass squinted at it, flipped it twice, then said, "140. You'll regret it." "Maybe," I said, but I didn't flinch. I walked out of there holding 10 20s and 2 5s. My hands were shaking, but my mind was dead still. Selling that ring wasn't the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was top 3. Still, it bought the key that bought the dock that gave my daughter something new, maybe even something better. The auction itself had been half circus, half graveyard. Every boat there had a story, and every bidder was trying to buy someone else's failure for pennies. A few mechanics barked into phones. Some flippers had clipboards. I just stood there in my old jeans, pretending I had a plan. When they rolled out the file on the Callista, I felt something hit me. Not like a punch, more like a pull. The name, Callista, Melanie's middle name. I hadn't heard it spoken out loud in years. They said the boat had no engines, electrical gutted, cabin intact. Starting bid, $100. Nobody laughed, but you could feel it. Everyone skipped ahead. I raised my hand. One other guy countered at $125. I saw his badge. Some charter company out of Hoboken. He didn't even look at the boat. Just checked a line on his sheet. "Cash on hand," I said. "Pay now. No inspection." The clerk narrowed his eyes. "You accept as is?" "I do." He gave me a half nod and signed the form. Just like that, I owned a boat. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. No landlord, no neighbors, no eviction notices shoved under the door. Back inside the cabin, I watched Lacey shift in her sleep. She was curled up under her jacket, clutching a stuffed penguin that used to belong to Melanie. The floor creaked every time I moved, but she didn't stir. I sat down across from her, back against the hull. The wood felt damp. The air still reeked. There was no engine, no power, no water hookup. I didn't know how I was going to fix it. I didn't even know if I could. But I knew this. Tonight, she wasn't listening to anyone scream. And that was a start. The next morning, I got a good look at what I'd actually bought. And yeah, Turns out as-is meant barely holding together. The Callista looked like she hadn't been moved in years. Teak decking, black with rot, crunched under my boots. Mildew climbed the cabin walls like ivy. The smell coming out of the bilge was so strong I gagged. Diesel. Moldavian salt. Plus that weird metallic funk old boats get when the wires are corroded and the air's trapped too long. The topside railing had rusted through in 3 places. One porthole had been sealed with duct tape and cardboard. Inside, the galley was a war zone. Drawers swollen shut, rusted hinges. Something growing under the sink I didn't want to touch without gloves. The cushions were soaked through. The head smelled like a chemical fire, but I could see past it. The hull was solid. No breaches, no blistering. The lines were still beautiful. Classic Bertram shape, good proportions. She was built right, back in a time when boats were made to last longer than marriages. Most people would have scrapped her. I didn't have that luxury. We had no working engine, no plumbing, no electricity. But we also didn't have paper-thin walls or cops knocking next door at 2 a.m. No landlord, no upstairs neighbor calling my daughter names. Just the water rocking underneath and the wind through the lines. Lacey stood in the middle of the cabin, flashlight in one hand, penguin in the other, and said real quiet, "No one can yell at us here." That hit me harder than the mildew. I dropped to one knee and checked under the dinette table. "Yeah, kiddo, just us, just our mess." That first night we sat out on the deck with a box of stale crackers, 2 juice boxes, and 1 working flashlight between us. She called it the best dinner ever, and I didn't correct her. I just nodded and watched the sun dip past the cranes in the distance. The next day, I got to work. We hauled out 3 contractor bags of soaked cushions and foam. I rigged a battery lantern from the trunk of my car and hung it in the galley. Lacey scrubbed the floor with dish soap and a towel while I pulled down what was left of the headliner. Rotted vinyl strips flaked apart in my hands. It wasn't cleaning. It was gutting. But little by little, the Callista stopped smelling like death and started smelling like bleach. Lacey got weirdly into it, like it was a game. Every time she found something that didn't completely fall apart in her hands, she'd go, "Look, Dad, this one's not broken." She found a little tin boat stashed behind a loose panel under the V-berth. Paint chipped, 1 wheel missing, but she held it like treasure. It sat on the counter for weeks afterward like a guardian. Then she found the panel under the old stove. It was maybe the 3rd or 4th day in. I'd been trying to scrape off grease hardened to the backsplash, and she was crawling around the galley pretending to be an explorer. She knocked on something, then said, "Dad, this part's hollow." I got down on my stomach next to her and tapped it. She was right. I grabbed a screwdriver and pried at the edges. The panel popped loose, and behind it was a small compartment. Inside that, wedged deep and sealed in corrosion, was a metal box about the size of a bread loaf. The lid was fused shut. I had to take pliers and slowly torque the top open, flaking rust and grease off the edges. It took 20 minutes. My hands were shaking when it finally gave way. Inside were stacks of papers, yellowed and brittle, wrapped in wax paper and sealed with duct tape. I pulled them out one by one, technical drawings, handwritten notes, a few Polaroids of what looked like engine parts. On the first page, in black ink, C.A. Walker. I flipped through more pages. Notes on voltage, load balance, something called field current compression. I didn't know what half the stuff meant, but it wasn't junk. The handwriting was too clean, the diagrams too exact. I saw equations, dimensions, build notes, and sketches of a strange cylindrical object wired into what looked like a power array. There was one line underlined twice. ZPR capture is stable when isolated from external grounding. ZPR. I didn't know what that meant either. But it wasn't normal boat stuff. Not bilge pump specs, not engine tuning. This was something else, something advanced. I sat there in the galley for a long time, just turning the pages over slowly. The boat creaked around me. Lacey curled up on the bench seat nearby, drawing the metal box in her sketch pad like it was some ancient artifact. She even wrote the initials C.A. Walker in block letters at the top of the page. I was still trying to wrap my head around it when she looked up and asked, "Is he the one who used to live here?" I nodded. Looks like it. Do you think he wanted someone to find this? I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to say no, that it was all forgotten junk, and none of it meant anything. But I couldn't lie to her, not with the way her face looked in that moment, like she knew this was bigger than the two of us. Maybe, I said finally. Maybe he did. That night, after Lacey fell asleep, I pulled out the box again. I sat on the deck, flashlight propped between my knees, flipping through the diagrams. Some pages had water damage, but the ones in the middle were crisp. There were circuit drawings I didn't understand, load transfer charts, and one photo of a half-assembled metal pod with copper lines running around the edge. I traced it with my thumb, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. I was a dockhand. I knew boats, engines, generators, pumps. But this? This wasn't marine tech. This wasn't made to power a bilge or steer a rudder. It was bigger, smarter, something experimental. And it had been hidden here, on this busted boat in this junkyard marina, for who knows how long. I didn't know what Walker had built. Not yet, but I could feel it already. This was more than some forgotten invention. This was a message, and we were the ones who found it. I kept the box hidden under the aft bench, wrapped in a plastic bag, taped tight. Every night after Lacey went to sleep, I'd pull it out and go through the pages again, looking for anything I missed, trying to figure out who the hell C.A. Walker was and what kind of machine he'd stashed away inside my busted secondhand boat. By the second weekend, I started tearing into the walls. I told myself it was for the wiring, for ventilation, for mold control. Truth was, I was looking for more. I had a feeling. The Callista didn't just hold one secret. Walker was methodical, precise. The way he packed that first box, the way he labeled his drawings, it all felt intentional, like he wanted someone to dig. Lacey helped when she could. She still had school during the week, but every Saturday she was by my side in that cabin with her ponytail tied back and a mask over her face, vacuuming out sawdust, organizing screws in a lunchbox, sketching every odd piece of tech we found. She loved it. Treated the whole thing like a mystery book she was living in. I pulled off the portside wall panel near the forward berth and found the next stash. 2 more notebooks, wrapped in Ziploc bags, sealed tight with electrical tape. I didn't even get all the tape off before I was reading. The writing had changed, still neat, still exact, but something in the tone was off, sharper, more guarded. They came again today. I told them nothing, said I dismantled it. I think they believed me. Patents denied, not for mechanical reasons, political, no interest in proof, only ownership. The core must stay hidden until it's ready, until someone knows how to use it without giving it away. The word they came up a lot. No names, no agencies, just they. The phrasing was clinical, but I could feel the pressure behind the words. Whoever this guy had been, he wasn't just a tinkerer. He was on the run from someone bigger than him. About 4 pages in, there was a drawing of a cylinder. Aluminum body, split shell, braided copper leads at both ends, maybe 12 inches long. The same shape I'd seen sketched in the earlier diagrams, but this time it had measurements. It wasn't theory anymore. This was a finished object. Lacey pointed at it. Do you think it's still here? I didn't know, but I knew I had to check. I went back to the wall I'd just pulled off, looked deeper behind the insulation, tapping each bulkhead for hollows. Midway through the starboard side, I hit something solid. Not wood, not foam, metal. I took the hammer and punched through. Behind the fiberglass was a hidden compartment, just big enough for a single item. When I pulled it out, my breath caught. It matched the sketch exactly. A cylinder, maybe the size of a thermos, perfectly machined. Brushed aluminum surface, no seams, no buttons. Just smooth metal and faint symbols etched near one end. Some kind of voltage marks, I guessed. It was cold to the touch, heavier than it looked. I set it on the counter like it was made of glass. Lacey climbed up next to me and stared at it with wide eyes. She didn't say a word, just reached out, touched it, and smiled. We were way past boat repairs now. I brought the sketches and one of the notebooks to my boss at the marina, Gary, the guy who'd given me dockhand work when I had nothing else. He was ex-Coast Guard, knew his way around every kind of marine system. I figured if anyone could tell me what this thing was supposed to do, it was him. He flipped through 2 pages and handed them back. "Whatever this is," he said, "it ain't for boats." "You sure?" I asked. "Power system, maybe? Backup engine?" He just shook his head. "You don't run copper like this for propulsion. And this math? You'd need a physics degree just to argue with it. My guess? Some fringe energy project. Experimental. Military, maybe. You ever hear of zero-point resonance capture?" He barked out a laugh. "Yeah, from a guy who wore foil in his hat and swore the moon landing was fake. But your guy, he didn't draw like a nut job." Lacey had drawn the cylinder in her sketchpad 3 times by then. She shaded it, labeled the ends, even added the little etch marks she saw. One morning, over breakfast, she pointed at it and said, "He wanted someone to find this, right?" I didn't have a good answer, but I felt it in my gut. Yeah, he did. He hid it just well enough to survive, but not so deep that it'd stay buried forever. He was waiting. For someone like me? I didn't know. But we'd stepped into something. I started treating the Callista like an archive. Every time I pried open a panel, I looked for hidden cavities. Every loose floorboard got tested. Every crack meant something might be tucked inside. Some weekends, we came up empty. Other days, I'd find scraps, more notes, bits of old metal, resistors and wiring tagged with little flags that said tested or unstable. The deeper I got, the more I wondered what kind of man Walker had been. He clearly knew what he was doing. His notes were professional, his parts custom machined, his systems elegant. But then there were the paranoid entries. They called it dangerous, said it was too efficient, that it couldn't exist. But it does. If I die, make sure the cylinder stays sealed. No testing without containment. They'll try to bury it, or worse, claim it as theirs. By the 4th notebook, I started locking the cabin when we left. I still did dockhand shifts to cover basics. Fuel for the car, food for Lacey, odds and ends. But every spare minute went into the Callista. I was chasing a dead man's trail, and I couldn't stop. At night, when Lacey was asleep and the harbor was quiet, I'd lie in the bunk and think about it. Why hide all this here? Why this boat? Why this town? If you had something this important, something this advanced, why not stash it in a lab or a safe or a vault out in the desert? The only answer I ever circled back to was this. No one would look for genius in a rusted-out fishing boat parked in a half-forgotten New Jersey marina. Walker didn't want to disappear. He wanted to be found. Just not by them. I was mid-scrub, trying to pull an old layer of epoxy off the galley counter, when the VHF snapped to life. For weeks it had been nothing but silence, dead static, a piece of broken equipment I hadn't gotten around to tossing. Then, out of nowhere, crackle, hiss, and a clipped male voice. "Callista, status check." "Do you copy?" I froze. Soap still on my hands. Heart thudding. I grabbed the mic before I could think. "Unit secure. Who is this?" Dead air. Just a faint pop of static. Then silence. I stared at the speaker, waiting, jaw tight. Nothing came back. For the rest of the day, I kept checking it, turning the dial, switching bands. Tapping the side like that would wake it back up. But it was gone. Whatever that was, whoever that was, it wasn't a fluke. That voice had known the boat's name. Next morning, I found the envelope. It was taped to the piling just outside the dock, half concealed behind a peeling flyer for a boat show that had been canceled 3 years ago. Yellow manila. No name on the front, just my slip number scribbled in permanent marker. I opened it right there on the dock with my pocket knife. Inside, a single piece of printer paper. "Meet me at Bay Point Diner, 6 p.m. Come alone." That was it. I didn't tell Lacey. She was doing homework at the small table I'd rigged near the V-berth, legs swinging as she traced over multiplication problems. I just said I had an errand and that I'd be back after dinner. She nodded without looking up. Bay Point was about 10 minutes from the marina, wedged between a vape shop and a discount liquor store. I parked out back and walked in, heart kicking hard the whole way. Place smelled like burnt coffee and fryer oil. A wall of booths ran down one side, all cracked vinyl and ancient laminate tables. I spotted him immediately, tall, wiry, gray hair combed flat, late 70s, easy, jacket zipped to the throat with a stitched-on patch above the left breast. C.W. He looked straight at me and nodded once. I slid into the booth across from him. "You're late," he said. "Traffic," I muttered, even though I wasn't. He didn't smile, just watched me. I noticed then that his eyes didn't blink much. Sharp, dry, like he'd been wide awake for way too long. "I was hoping the right person would find her," he said. I didn't ask who her meant. I knew. "You live aboard," he went on. "You didn't gut the thing. You didn't sell off the parts. That matters." I leaned forward, arms on the table. "Who the hell are you?" He didn't flinch. "C. Walker. Charles Andrew. The name on the notes you've been reading." My stomach nodded. "I thought you were dead." He raised one shoulder. "Legally I am." We sat there for a few seconds while a waitress came by. He waved her off before she could speak. I ordered a coffee just to have something in front of me. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a USB drive. Plain black. No label. "This," he said, sliding it toward me, "is the rest of the design." I didn't touch it. "What is it, really?" Walker sat back, shoulders against the booth like he was bracing for a hit. "It's a power core. Clean. Contained. Off-grid. Doesn't show up on scans. No fuel required. Some kind of generator." He tilted his head. "Closer to a collector. Pulls ambient resonance and isolates usable frequency patterns. Converts it into silent current. No heat. No loss. First-gen prototypes couldn't stay stable for more than 10 hours. That one you found? Last generation. It's clean. Tested. Holds charge indefinitely." I stared at the drive. "Why hide it?" He didn't hesitate. "Because they would have buried it. Weaponized it. Lied about it. You show people a tech that doesn't require oil, solar, or combustion, and you turn off a $1 trillion faucet. You think they're gonna let that happen?" "Who's they?" He didn't answer. I picked up the drive and held it in my palm. It felt heavier than it should have. "You want me to build it? I want you to finish what I couldn't. I'm not an engineer." He leaned in, elbows creaking on the table. "You live on a boat with no running water and figured out how to reverse ventilate a cabin without power. You rewired a dead bilge pump using car parts. You have instincts. You have need. And," his voice dropped, "you have a daughter." That landed hard. "She asked me last week," I said, "if we could ever live somewhere where nobody yells." Walker's expression softened for the first time. "And now she does." I nodded slowly. "Why me?" I asked. "Why now?" He shrugged. "Because it's time. And because you didn't rip out the heart." I opened my mouth to ask what that meant, but he stood up. "Don't try to find me. This number will be deactivated by morning. You'll know if I need to reach you again." "Wait," I said. "How did you know I'd find it?" He looked down at me, eyes sharp again. "I didn't. But I buried it somewhere only the desperate would bother to look. People who needed a place, not just a prize." He turned and walked out without looking back. I sat there for another 5 minutes, staring at the USB. Then I tucked it in my pocket, dropped a 20 on the table, and left. Back on the Callista, Lacey was asleep with a book open on her chest. I pulled the sliding door shut behind me, locked it, and sat in the dark for a long time. The USB drive was in my hand the whole time. I didn't plug it in yet, just held it, because something was happening. And I was in the middle of it now. The next morning I got a text from an unlisted number. Just an address. That's it. No name, no message. But I knew who it was. I told Lacey I had to check on something for the marina and left her with an old laptop loaded up with cartoons and math games. She barely looked up, already buried in her sketchbook. I double-checked the hatch lock on the Callista before I headed out. The address led to a row of metal storage units tucked behind a half-abandoned boatyard, the kind of place people dump busted crab traps and broken outboards and forget about them. Gate was open. No one around. Unit 38 had a rusted-out padlock hanging off the door, snapped clean through. Walker was already inside. He didn't say a word. Just waved me in and stepped aside. The thing was mounted in a crate, about 3 feet tall, squat, metallic gray with dull copper coils wrapped around the core like ribs on a spine. No labels, no serials, no logos. It looked like something pulled off a movie set, except it was real, solid, buzzing with silence. He walked around it, tapping the side gently like a mechanic showing off a rebuilt engine. "Third generation," he said. "Self-contained. Will keep the Callista running for years. No fuel, no heat signature, no maintenance." I walked around it slowly, keeping a full arm's length. "It runs off that resonance thing?" He nodded. "ZPR. Stabilized now. The unit you found was proof of concept. This one is operational." "What happens if it breaks?" "It doesn't." I should have been skeptical. I wasn't. Maybe I'd just seen enough, read enough of his notes, held enough of his work in my hands to believe him. He gave me a folded sheet with a hand-drawn diagram and a note. "Mount away from metal-heavy walls. Ground insulation required, no parallel circuits." Every detail was sketched. Every risk accounted for. "You'll wire it in yourself," he said. "You've already been doing it whether you realize it or not. You're not coming? I can't be near it anymore." I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. We both knew what he was staying ahead of. I drove it back strapped in the bed of an old borrowed marina truck, wrapped in 2 moving blankets, ratchet strapped to hell. It felt like hauling a live nuke. Every bump in the road I kept checking the rearview mirror to see if it had shifted, but it didn't. Just sat there like it knew where it was going. Back at the dock, I waited until Lacey went to sleep before bringing it aboard. Slipped it down the companionway with a pulley rig I threw together with dock lines and a come-along winch. It took 3 hours just to get it positioned under the bench in the galley. Then I wired it in. 3 days. That's how long it took. I didn't eat much. Slept even less. I followed Walker's notes exactly, cut a small mount into the bulkhead, ran insulated cable through old conduits, installed grounding pads behind every panel. Lacey kept asking what I was doing. I just told her it was an upgrade. She kept drawing it from memory, over and over again. By the 3rd night, the connections were all set. I checked the schematic for the 5th time. Everything matched. Wires secure, insulation tight, voltage regulators aligned. I even grounded the fridge circuit just in case. I stared at the switch for a full minute before I flipped it. Then I flipped it. No hum. No thump. Just a soft click from the breaker panel. Then silence. A different kind of silence. The lights came on. Not all at once. Just the galley at first. Warm, steady glow from the overheads. No flicker. No hum. No delay. Then the nav panel lit up. The bilge sensor flashed green. The cabin fan turned slow and quiet like it was made to do it. I heard a gasp behind me. Lacey stood at the edge of the hatch, half awake, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring at the lights like they were fireworks. "You fixed it," she whispered. I opened my mouth to say something, but then the space heater kicked on in the corner. She cried. Not loud, not dramatic. Just soft tears running down her cheeks as she walked into the galley and held her hands out over the heater like it was the best thing she'd ever felt. I didn't move. I just stood there, hands still on the switch, eyes locked on the steady glow of that little red light. It wasn't just power. It was heat, safety, stability. After months of scraping by, duct taping broken sockets and boiling water on a single camp burner, We had real power. The next morning, Walker showed up at the dock. I saw him from the corner of the galley window, just standing there, hands in his coat pockets, watching the boat like a man visiting a grave. I stepped off and met him halfway. "She's on," I said. He nodded once. "You're the first person to activate it without me. How many others tried?" "Too many." I didn't ask what happened to them. I didn't need to. He pulled out a small notebook and handed it to me. It wasn't one of his old ones. This one was new, clean cover. Pages blank except for the first few, where he'd drawn something bigger, something that looked like a system map. Power cells connected by lines to docks, small buildings, off-grid nodes, like he was scaling it. "This is what comes next," he said. "Distribution. Eventually. Start small. Quiet. Prototypes only. You'll need a shell company, a cover job. You're in deep now. Play it slow, or you'll burn it before it grows. And if they come?" He looked me in the eye, dead serious. "Then you protect it, however you have to." I nodded. It wasn't a threat. It was a handoff. He stepped back. "I won't be in touch again. Not directly." "That it?" He paused, then added, "Keep the core cool. Don't let anyone scan it. Don't connect it to the grid. And for God's sake, don't tell anyone what powers it." Then he walked off. No goodbye, no thanks. Just gone. I went back aboard, notebook in hand, and found Lacey drawing again, this time sketching the heater with little lightning bolts coming out of it. I didn't stop her, because she wasn't just drawing heat anymore. She was drawing hope. The next time Walker showed up, he was carrying a battered leather satchel and a manila folder thick enough to stop a bullet. He didn't knock, didn't call ahead, just stepped down onto the dock like he'd never left and waited for me to open the hatch. I let him in without a word. He spread everything out on the galley table. Papers, documents, notarized forms, a thumb drive, a portable hard drive, and one check from a private trust bank in Delaware that didn't even have a routing number printed on it. He tapped the folder once. "This is the formal transfer," he said. "Intellectual property rights, patent drafts, provisional blueprints, control of the tech. You'll hold it all now." I stared at the paperwork. Thick legal wording, engineering terms I didn't recognize, and the same initials at the bottom of every signature line, C.A. Walker. "You're just giving this to me?" I asked. "No," he said. "I'm putting it where they won't expect it." He pointed at the trust paperwork. "There's $3.6 million in that fund, structured over 5 years, locked to you and your daughter only. Use it for development, materials, legal firewalls, not personal gain." "You're buying my loyalty?" "I'm buying your time, your energy, your ability to stay hidden while building something the world isn't ready for." I flipped through the documents again. Clean, legit looking. The trust was listed under Horizon Shell Logistics LLC, some random-sounding company name that, I assumed, was just another cloak. "What's the catch?" I asked. He didn't blink. "You'll be watched, quietly. Soft threats first. Background checks. People sniffing around. The deeper you go, the closer they'll come." "Who are they?" "The same ones who made me disappear." He said it like fact, not drama, not mystery, just business. I sat back and crossed my arms. Why not go public? Why not dump this to every outlet, every science journal, every tech blog? They wouldn't publish it. I tried. Twice. One editor called it a hoax. The second ghosted me, and 2 days later, a federal contractor showed up at my lab door. "And you think I'll succeed where you didn't?" He leaned in. "You have no credentials, no track record, no history in the field. That makes you invisible, for now. Seems like a bad bet. It's the only one left." I looked over at the back of the cabin. Lacey was curled up in the corner with a blanket, pretending not to listen, but I could see the way her eyes flicked over the edge of her sketchbook. She was always listening. Walker followed my gaze. "She's part of this," he said. "You get that, right?" I nodded. "She's the reason I'm even still trying." That pulled something out of him. A brief flicker in his face. Regret, maybe. Or memory. "She's why I picked you," he said. "Not the tech work, not the notes. You could have scrapped that boat and sold off everything. But you didn't. You built a life inside it. You still haven't told me why you're walking away." He stood and zipped the satchel shut. "Because I already ran my clock out. I'm not safe, not stable. Too many dead ends attached to my name. You're just gonna vanish?" "I already have." I stood there, one hand on the table, the other clenched at my side. Part of me wanted to grab him, demand more answers, tell him this wasn't how you drop something like this on a guy with a kid and a half-rebuilt boat. But I didn't move. Because deep down, I already knew this was the last time I'd see him. Before he stepped out, he turned back and set a small USB drive next to the heater. Full schematics, manufacturing protocol, site setup instructions, backups of my journals, encrypt it, keep it offline. Run cold until you're ready. He paused, then added, "And make sure she keeps drawing." I didn't say anything, just watched him walk out the hatch and disappear down the dock like he'd never existed at all. 2 days later, he was gone. I tried the number. Dead. I walked by the storage unit, cleaned out. Even the satchel he'd carried, vanished. What was left behind was that USB, the patents, the trust, and a sealed envelope I found tucked between the pages of his last notebook. No name on the outside. Inside, one sentence, handwritten in the same clean block letters. "Don't turn it into a brand. Let the work speak." Lacey noticed before I did. She came up to me while I was sorting through cables and said, "He's not coming back, is he?" I shook my head. She sat beside me, quiet for a long time. "Are we still going to fix things?" "Yeah," I said. "Now more than ever." We weren't tenants anymore. We weren't squatting on a broken boat with a few working lights and a fan. The Callista had turned into something else. A base, a laboratory, a launch point. A secret tied to a future that didn't rely on the grid, or the market, or anyone else's permission. I scanned the drive, copied the schematics onto a cold storage laptop, encrypted the rest, and wiped the originals. I burned the paper backups after scanning them. Then I rewired the boat again, made sure nothing was left connected to outside power. I changed the lock on the hatch. I even rotated the mooring line so we had a clear view of both dock entrances. I wasn't paranoid. I was preparing. Walker had handed off a loaded gun, and I wasn't about to shoot myself in the foot with it. The next few nights, I barely slept. Every creak on the dock made me sit up. Every car door down the road made me reach for the flashlight and check the lines again. But nothing came. No men in suits, no black vans, no surveillance I could detect. Just the hum of the Callista, alive and steady. I sat with Lacey one night as she colored by lamplight. She drew the Callista again, but this time with little satellite dishes and solar panels and a dome-shaped lab on top. I laughed and asked if she was planning renovations. She just said, "This is where it starts." And she was right. Because the Callista wasn't just a place to sleep anymore. It was where the work began. And I was in charge. Jake let me rent the shed next to his marina office for next to nothing. Said I was the only guy on the dock who didn't smoke weed on his lunch break, or owe him for parts. It was 20 by 20, smelled like sawdust and old diesel, and had one busted window with a view of the parking lot. But it had a bench, a vise, and power lines I didn't need to touch, because the Callista's core ran half the tools through an underground conduit I rigged in secret. That shed became the start. I didn't put a name on the door right away. Didn't advertise. No big signs. Just word of mouth, quiet jobs, things that didn't ask for permits or inspections. Boat repair mostly. Wiring work, bilge replacements, nothing flashy. But at night, after the dock was empty and the radios were quiet, I did the real work. I pulled schematics from Walker's archive, rebuilt modules in plastic cases, used spare battery shells from trolling motors to hide the cores. Every unit small, discreet, hard to trace. I kept them unmarked, no barcodes, no branding, no serials. just function. When I finally filed the LLC paperwork, I called it Horizon Harbor Tech. Lacey came up with the name, said it sounded like something real. The mission was simple: quiet installs of clean marine energy units, starting with people who'd never afford them otherwise. First 2 installs were oyster trawlers in Louisiana, family-owned boats running off fumes and busted diesel pumps. I drove down myself, pretended to be a hobbyist running off-grid solar backups. Took 3 days. Didn't charge $1. Both boats ran clean after that. A month later, we shipped a sealed unit to a floating school barge on the Willamette River in Oregon. Teacher called back crying. Said it was the first time the kids could read after sunset without a flashlight. Lacey looked up from her sketchpad and said, "Every kid should have lights when they draw at night." That line stuck with me. I had a map taped to the inside of the shed, pushpins and harbors across the country. All small towns, working docks, low-income families. I wasn't changing the world, just trying to make sure a few people didn't have to choose between staying warm and staying afloat. Then came the suit. He showed up at the shop one morning in pressed khakis and boat shoes too clean for someone who'd ever set foot on a dock. Said he was with an energy research firm. Flashed a fake smile and a real business card. Offered to buy the prototype tech outright. $8 million, full acquisition, full non-disclosure. No questions, no audits. Said I'd never have to touch a wrench again. I told him to get off my property. He didn't flinch, just nodded like he expected it. Said his offer would stand. For a while said, "Men like you usually come around." I didn't. The next week, someone broke into my workbench, didn't take tools, didn't touch the cash box, just opened every drawer, unrolled every schematic, and pulled the covers off the false battery shells like they already knew where to look. I found a bug inside one of the charging ports. Tiny, digital, military grade. I tossed it in the harbor. After that, I installed a motion camera on the Callista, disconnected from everything but an encrypted handheld monitor I kept under my pillow. I started sleeping in shifts again, same as I did after Walker vanished. But I didn't stop. I kept building. Smaller units, better seals, fewer copper lines, more composites. I taught Lacey how to solder, how to splice insulated leads, how to check voltage without getting zapped. She caught on fast. Faster than I expected. We logged every install in a red notebook with no names, no GPS, no dates, just initials and type codes. Everything stayed under the radar. I used cash whenever I could, bartered when I had to. I made contacts in marinas who didn't ask questions and knew how to keep quiet. The work wasn't pretty. The parts weren't always legal. But it worked. Jake knew something was up. He saw how I kept odd hours, how the shed never had scrap left behind. One afternoon, he found me in the back unloading a sealed core from the trunk of a car with out-of-state plates. He didn't say anything at first. Just watched me for a second, then lit a cigarette and said, "Whatever it is you're doing, just don't blow up my dock." I gave him a look. He shrugged. "You're the only one around here trying to fix anything." The Callista stayed moored at Slip 71. It never left. Never needed to. The boat was our home, but it was also our prototype. Every change I made, every new component, I tested it there first. If it survived the Callista's leaky bulkheads and warped floorboards, it was ready for the world. We insulated the sleeping quarters, put a second panel on the deck to capture ambient charge data. Lacey kept sketching improvements, designing little diagrams with arrows and notes like, "Make this quieter," or "Move the switch here." One night she asked if we'd ever move off the boat. I said maybe one day. She said, "I don't want to. This is where we fix things." And that's what we kept doing. Quiet installs, careful partnerships, all under the radar. No press, no patents filed in our name, no articles, no headlines, just circuits, solder, and silence. We weren't building a company. We were building a movement no one could see. And that's exactly how we wanted it. It showed up in the mailbox Jake let me use behind the marina office. No name, no return address. Plain white envelope, thick paper, one stamp. Inside, There was just a single sheet folded once down the middle. You passed. You protected the core. The real work begins now. That was it, followed by a second sheet, folded tighter, drawn in black ink on blueprint vellum. A full schematic, cleaner than Walker's old sketches. This one was dock scale, wider node spacing, larger conduits, modular cores linked through a central junction. Labeled Unit Mains, Dock-Wide Power System, Generation 4. It looked like something ripped straight out of a DARPA white paper, only this one came with a postscript handwritten in the margin. Install by spring. I'll contact you again. That was all. No signature. But I didn't need one. Back on the Callista, I unfolded the diagram on the table, spread it flat, and stared at the parts list. Materials I could get. Tools I already had. It was doable. Not easy, not quick, but possible. Lacey stood behind me, arms crossed, squinting over my shoulder. "He's still watching," she said. I didn't answer, because she was right. We got to work that same week. The schematic listed specs for cold weather loads, smart ballast relays, and heat-efficient grounding. It wasn't meant for us. It was meant for communities way out. Places where grid power didn't reach or broke every other storm. Places that still burned diesel to keep lights on. We picked Alaska. Through one of our quiet contacts, a supply chain manager from a short-haul ferry crew, I found a fishing village on the southern inlet. 42 homes, 1 schoolhouse, 6 boats. Diesel tank 3 miles away, ice roads unreliable. Power was always one blizzard away from vanishing. I didn't use my real name. Shipped the unit in 3 crates labeled environmental sensor equipment. Took a red-eye out with 2 crates in tow, the rest following through private cargo. My hands were shaking from the cold and the nerves when I stepped off the ferry with the first unit strapped to a rolling dolly. The local dockmaster helped me unload without asking questions. Said they'd been promised help before, but it never showed. This time it did. Install took 5 days. I followed the new schematic to the letter, sealed each connection, buried the lines under insulated trays, ran redundancy loops across 2 weatherproof panels. The last unit clicked on at 3:42 p.m. that Friday. No sparks, no hum, just light. Clean, steady light across the dock, the village, and the boats. They offered to pay me with smoked fish and used snow tires. I told them to keep it. I flew back home that Sunday, hands blistered, boots cracked, feeling like I'd actually done something worth a damn. After that, we shifted into training mode. I didn't want to be the only guy who knew how to build this thing. Too risky, too easy to stop. So I made copies of the instructions, stripped down, simplified, sketched into bite-sized pages with Lacey helping me draw the diagrams. We started with 3 volunteers. One was a laid-off electrical engineer who'd been living out of his truck. One was a kid from the community college who'd built his own e-bike from junkyard parts. The third was a former ship electrician with 2 DUIs and something to prove. I gave them each a kit, a test bench, and 2 rules. No phones, no cloud backups, no questions about where it came from. They followed instructions. They got results. Lacey called them the Spark Team. She designed a patch logo for their jackets, just a bolt of lightning inside a boat hull. Each one went home with a kit after 6 weeks. The rest came in waves. Kids from trade schools, guys burned out of startups, women who'd been told they weren't technical enough by some suit behind a conference table. We didn't care about resumes. We cared about hands and instincts. If you could wire a light without getting shocked and follow a spec sheet, you were in. We kept shipping small-scale units out west through partners we trusted, mobile clinics, river barges, research outposts, all off-grid, all undocumented. The Callista stayed docked through it all. Still smelled like mold on rainy days. Still leaked near the anchor locker if you didn't tape it right. The floorboards creaked more than they used to, and the head door never latched unless you kicked it twice. But inside, it pulsed with life. The heater clicked on every morning at 6 a.m. sharp. The coffee maker started brewing at 6:05. The charge monitors blinked steady through the night, and the workbench glowed warm even in the dead of winter. That boat might have been falling apart, but it never failed. It became the Pulse Center. Blueprints were drawn there. Units were tested there. Plans whispered between mugs of instant coffee at 2 in the morning. It was the last place anyone would look for a tech revolution, and that's exactly why it worked. I still slept lighter than I used to, always half listening, always checking the monitor when a seagull landed wrong on the dock. But I slept better too. No rent, no neighbors banging on the wall, no landlord threats shoved under the door, just ocean, tech, and peace. This morning I sat on the edge of the Callista's deck, coffee in one hand, watching Lacey walk a group of new volunteers through the core install like she'd been doing it her whole life. The crew was from Puerto Rico, 2 guys from a coastal tech school and a woman who ran an off-grid community up in the hills near Arecibo. All sharp, all listening closely. Lacey stood beside the open shell of the training core, explaining the process one piece at a time. Mount spacing, grounding path, cooling loop. She even cracked a joke about cross-wiring the diode caps, and they laughed like they got it. She didn't fumble. Her hands were steady, voice clear. She even wore her sleeves rolled the way Melanie used to when she got serious about a task, right above the elbows, like she meant business. It caught me hard in the chest, seeing her like that. Grown, but not grown up. Still my kid, still full of grit, but with this quiet power that didn't need permission. When she finished, they clapped lightly and thanked her in Spanish. She nodded, said de nada, and walked over to sit next to me. Her shoulders relaxed like she'd just finished lifting something heavy. She stared out at the water, then asked, "Dad, do you ever think about how close we were to getting evicted?" "Every day," I said. We sat there for a while without talking. The marina buzzed with low noise, tools clanking, someone playing a radio from across the lot, a gull dive bombing a trash bin. But under all of it, there was this strange calm, like the place finally had a pulse that didn't come from tension or panic. It came from purpose. The lot around us had changed. What used to be just Jake's crusty workshop and a bunch of storage sheds was now a low-key hub. We had visitors, engineers, students, off-the-grid folks looking for power without strings. A solar shed stood where the old winch used to be. Beside it, a shipping container converted into a parts lab, stacked with prepped units, spare cores, and insulation kits sorted by climate zones. Jake gave us half his lot, rent-free. Said we were doing something bigger than boat repair. Said it felt good to be around people fixing things instead of breaking them. We kept our heads down, though. No news coverage, no company website, no founder story. Everything was word of mouth, local, trusted. That's how Walker wanted it. No flash, no flags, just results that spoke loud without needing a mic. That night, Lacey curled up next to me with her sketchpad open in her lap. She was doodling ideas for a mobile install trailer, a tiny lab on wheels. She looked up, halfway through a drawing, and said, "I don't want a big house anymore." I looked at her. "No?" She shook her head. "I want this. I want to live where we fix things." I didn't say anything for a second, just nodded, because I got it. The Callista had started as a last-ditch shot, a gamble. $100 and a rusted key to stay off the street. It was supposed to be a temporary shelter, something to stop the bleeding. Now, it was headquarters. A floating nerve center for something most people didn't even know was happening. Quiet power, real tech, no noise. We still had buckets under 2 of the windows. Still had to slap the cabin door twice to get it to shut when it rained. Still had a diesel stink in the back locker that I could never scrub out. But we also had warmth, light, momentum. And finally, after years of survival, after scraping by and selling off things I swore I'd never part with, I wasn't just getting through the day anymore. I was building something that mattered. Would you have trusted Walker's tech or walked away? Drop your answer in the comments and hit like and subscribe for more stories like this.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.